Well, let me take you to another instance where you use we quite clearly to refer to Ngapashaya, yourself, and Sergeant Nkosi in relation to a tender at the City of Tshwane. Can you go to page 99? You have it?
I've got page 99.
And there you'll see that on the 7th of January at message time 8:55:35, which is 10:55 in real time, you send a screenshot to Sergeant Nkosi advertising a tender for the supply, delivery and offloading of refuse bags for the City of Tshwane for a period of 3 years as and when required. And the message underneath says, Mpwetu, I've sent the above to Becky, in other words, to his brother. We need to regroup on it. What is we regrouping on a tender about?
So firstly, let me clarify a few things. This was a tender that was advertised on the 12th of December. Sent it to him on the 7th of January. There's nothing sensitive about that. There's nothing confidential, something in the public domain. I think that's the first clarification I want to bring on board. Second, it hadn't closed, it was still open. Regrouping was me giving them advice in terms of what the key administrative requirements are, mandatory requirements, as well as key evaluation criteria. This seemed like something easy, and if you get that right, the competition would now be purely based on pricing. As I've stated earlier on, it is allowed by law. This is a matter that was even escalated by the City Service Delivery War Room. So the regrouping, that meant giving advice on an open tender within the city in reference to administrative, mandatory, as well as evaluation criteria in a general context. The we, again, it's just the way we used to speak. And I'm happy you're raising this because it is one of the items where it does validate that. We does not mean me, him, and Ngapashaya. I've got no interest in that. It was just a way of speaking.
Sorry, can you just clarify what is allowed by law? You selecting one potential supplier and advising them on how they should comply with the requirements, and then you later on evaluating the same tender. You say that is allowed by law?
No, I'm saying what's allowed is to explain where clarification matters.
No, but here you are selecting one service provider, potential, and you are saying, give this to your brother, presumably so that he can submit a bid, and you must regroup to advise him on how he must complete, so that the only thing remaining is the price. And then you are going to later on evaluate the same tender.
I will not evaluate, I would adjudicate.
Adjudicate?
Yes.
Yes. So you say that's what is allowed by law?
Chair, the context of this was me to provide general clarification. And I could provide general clarification on anyone who asked me that. He had asked me in previous instances on this matter. It started with the matter in terms of the vendor number. During those discussions, he had asked me.
So you do it with all the bidders, or you choose one and you only give advice to that one?
Bidders are at liberty to ask me, and it does happen, where they send formal clarification emails, and we provide that as well.
And you meet with them to regroup with them to
if needs be, Chair, they are invited to come on board, and we would discuss them physically if they still maintain that they can't understand them. As long as the bid is still open, and as long as you don't interact with any documentation. And also, maybe for the House to know, they were unsuccessful because they didn't meet any of those mandatory requirements. So even if I did do that, it didn't assist because they didn't comply with the ambit of the law, and they were not awarded on this bid. But the principle and the prescripts behind that, it is allowed, Chair. There's nothing wrong with that. As long as there's no physical interference in interaction with documentation from those bidders.
The print here is very fine, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. But I understand you to be saying this was a bid or a tender that was open.
Yes.
You were bringing it to Beggy's attention. When you say in your message, I've sent the above to Beggy.
Yes.
You were alerting him.
No. So in previous discussions, that he had told me that he had seen this, Sergeant Nkosi. So I was confirming if this is the one, then I'm sending it to him. He had raised this to me. It was in the public domain since the 12th of December. This was the 7th of January in this time. So they were already aware of it. It wasn't me initiating anything, Commissioner Balon.
Why were you sending this to Beggy if this tender is in the public domain? And my focus is not whether it was or not in the public domain. So let's not make that the conversation. But now that you have said that, if this tender is in the public domain, So presumably, Biggie is aware of it, presumably. Why are you sending it to him if you are not alerting him to, hey, friend, there is a tender like this?
No, I was confirming that this is the one. I was not actively alerting him. We had a discussion previously, and this was my way of me confirming. Some individuals...
Finish?
Yes, Chair, that was a confirmation.
So you were confirming to him what?
But if
sorry,
this is the
I'm
one...
not understanding your explanation.
Okay, so I was confirming if this is the one that they alerted me to, firstly. Secondly, I'm available to discuss any key administrative, mandatory and evaluation criteria if you don't understand that. So if needs be, let's meet to regroup. I can be able to explain that to you.
Your message says, I have sent the above to Becky.
I agree,
You don't
Commissioner.
say, I am confirming whether this is the one.
Yes.
Your message, and again, maybe you will say it's because this is on text and you write informally, but your message as it stands now, it is, you have sent this to Becky. That's all it is. And then the next thing you say is different. You say, we need to regroup on it. And your explanation is, it was to advise him about how to complete it. And I'm summarizing, how to complete it minus price. So that price is the only issue. So you're conveying two different things. You sent it to him, come, let's meet so I can help you complete. That doesn't square up, for me at least, with you were asking for confirmation from him whether this is the tender that he was talking about. Because the regrouping, you must be planning to regroup about something that you are certain about. You're certain it is this tender that you're sending to him. There is certainty about it. That's why the invitation to regroup.
Okay. Commissioner, firstly, the intention around that, it was a reminder. We had a discussion about this previously. Me was just confirming, is this what you were talking about earlier on? Secondly, I did not help complete. I just want to get that clear. I'm not allowed to help complete documentation. I'm not allowed to interact with submissions by law, but I am allowed to explain critical evaluation criteria, mandatory documentation, and mandatory requirements if needs be. That was the context of this message.
What does that mean? I mean, the tender document does tell, and that provide explanation. It tells all bidders what information they should be providing in the document, right? And what should accompany that document. And that's what everybody gets evaluated on. So when you say you were going to be advising them about evaluation criteria, and by the way, this is not the first time that Ngapesha, if we look at the sequence of messages, it's not the first time that Ngapesha is submitting a bid. And so I'm not sure that, it's not clear to me that they would have required your advice about what is the evaluation criteria, among other things.
Yes.
So can you just then explain what were you going to be advising Becky and Sergeant Nkosi about relating to this tender?
Yes. Commissioner, like I said, it was purely to advise if needs be, in terms of administrative, mandatory, and evaluation criteria. Nothing else and nothing more. They had submitted many bids. They were unsuccessful. Equally with this bid, they were unsuccessful because they did not comply with whatever requirements that were raised. So bidders don't understand compliance document. We just looked at item C and D, which said we want companies, rates and taxes, but then D says also individuals. So most people misinterpret that and only consider one. That's why, Commissioner, I even attached annexure GM 2 and 3, because this matter was so persistent. It was even escalated to the echelons of the city service delivery ward.
No, I do understand that. I don't think you need to repeat that over and over and spend time on that, as much time as you're spending on it. We are speaking about a very specific bid. This is not general, the general issues that you advise bidders on. There's a specific tender. You alert a potential party to it, and then you say, we need to regroup on it. So you are actually he's not asked you, he's not said to you, and that's not being your evidence. You're not saying, he said to you, I don't know how to complete it, or I want advice from you. You initiate on your story or on your account, you sent it to him to confirm if this was the bid he was talking about. And then, in addition to that, you say we need to regroup on it. So here you are, chairperson of the BAC, inviting a very specific party who wants to bid, who you're suggesting they should bid. In fact, I want to say that to me, this looks like you were alerting him to a tender and you wanted him to submit, and you needed to get together so that you can discuss what you're discussing about completing that tender. And you are chairperson of the BAC that is going to be adjudicating that very bid, and you see nothing wrong with that. Even in hindsight, you don't see anything wrong with it if you didn't see it at the time.
Chair, firstly, I did not actively alert. I am giving context. I think some of these matters, unfortunately, there is an element of restriction to what we have in front of us. But the context behind this was not me actively alerting. It was a confirmation taken into account from a previous discussion that we had. How I'm validating that is that this was already in the public domain. I know you say it's not relevant, Chair, but with due permission, it forms a critical component, part of my explanation, and that they had seen that. It was just a confirmation. Secondly, regroup if needs be. If you need clarification, I'm available. If you need clarification on these matters, only restricted to this, I'm available for that. And ultimately, Chair, they were not compliant. They were not awarded on this bid in any case because they failed to meet the minimum requirements, which means matter is falling dead on this aspect, and I did not interfere and I could not interfere, regardless of whether I sat at BAC.
Yeah, well, the last thing I want to say is your text doesn't say we regroup if need be, which is completely different from what is written here. What is written here is we need to regroup on it. It's quite positive. It's not open-ended as to it's up to Begi and Sergeant Kosi. You actually say we do need to get together about it. That's my last comment on it.
Chair, before we move on,
Yes.
It's just unfortunate that messages are informal. And that's what I meant at this point. So I want to give that as my advice, as my testimony to the Commission in terms of clarifying the content of that discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sosa.
Chair, we've gone long past 4 o'clock.
Let's go until past, perhaps.
I'm sorry, Chair. I should
Or should we stop here?
Can I ask if we can adjourn at this point? I did assure my learned friend that we'd never run much beyond 4 o'clock.
I saw Ms. Van
Yeah,
den
Chairperson,
Heever there.
I don't want to discuss it in public, but it's very difficult to go past 4. Thank you.
Let's adjourn and resume at 9:30 tomorrow.